Seed starting should be simple, right? You just plant a tomato seed in the ground, you give it some sun and some water, and pretty soon, boom, you got a tomato plant. Well, yes, but also no. So while seed starting doesn't have to be overcomplicated, we don't need a lot of fancy tools or gadgets, we don't need a degree in plant science to get our seeds started. But there are some best practices and there's some things that we want to avoid. So today I'm going to dive into some common seed starting mistakes and how you can avoid making them. And we're also going to talk about some of those best practices to help you be a more successful gardener. Starting your seeds yourself is going to save you money. It's going to help you get a jump on the growing season, and it's going to make you a better gardener because you're going to learn more from starting your own seeds than you will from starting plant starts that you get from the big box stores or the nurseries. But the mistakes I want to talk about today and the things we want to try to avoid can lead to weak and struggling plants. It can lead to a very frustrating growing season and minimal harvest. And ultimately, it can get you pretty discouraged and feeling like you want to give up on seed starting. So to avoid all of that, I want to talk through some of these common mistakes that people make, how we can avoid them, and what to do instead. The first mistake we want to avoid is using the wrong soil. Seeds need a light, fluffy seed starting mix for the best germination and to get going. So you're going to want to buy a seed starting mix. I get mine off Amazon for like $8. It's organic. Mine's not perfect because there are some bigger chunks. That's what I'm using today, but it does the job. Alternatively, you can make your own seed starting mix with peat moss or cocoa coir, vermiculite, and perlite. There's some simple ratios. People have different takes on the ratios, but you can do a quick Google search. It'll give you a good starting point, and then you just kind of play around with it until you have the right ratio. Either way, your seed starting mix needs to be light, fluffy, very well draining. You're not going to want something like heavy garden soil that you put in a raised bed or even potting mix. Potting mix can work in a pinch if you're starting in trays or cups. However, it's just not the best practice. It's just not the best growing medium to get your seeds started. Potting mix is great for growing your plants in containers throughout their life, but it's not necessarily the best seed starting mix. So instead, I prefer, like I said, to buy mine off Amazon. It's relatively cheap. You can make yours if you want to try to save some money. A lot of people will also plant directly in compost. Now, this may not be a bad thing, especially if you're growing in ground. However, a lot of times compost has really big chunks and pieces, and that can lead to poor germination or just a poor growing environment for your small seedlings. As they get bigger and they grow up, it's not going to matter as much. But those small, tiny, tender seedlings are going to struggle if you have big pieces of not finished compost. The second problem I see a lot of people make is not providing enough light for their little seedlings. It might sound like a good idea to take your seedlings and put them in a windowsill that gets a lot of sun, but this is not very practical for growing them. So seedlings are going to need about 12 to 16 hours of light per day. And when growing them inside, there are special lights specifically designed to provide the right type of light for your plants. So you're going to want to do your research here. You can set up a simple grow light system yourself pretty cheaply, and it's pretty simple to do, or you can buy one that's already made. This is what I did. I just bought one off Amazon because it was just easier for me. I don't do a lot of growing indoors right now, so I can't show you my setup because I don't have one. I live in Florida, and I can take my seeds directly outside and allow them to get natural light. If you live in a warm, temperate climate, you could probably do the same thing. Or if you live somewhere with a shorter growing season, inside's probably going to be a better option. So do your research here, take your time in deciding on your grow light system and setup, and make sure that the lights that you're providing your little seedlings are strong enough and they have the ability to be raised up and down. As your seedlings grow, they're going to need to be further away from the light. But when they're just starting out, they're really going to need to be very close to that light. What's going to happen is if they're not getting enough light or if they're not close enough to the light source, you'll wind up with what we call leggy seedlings. And you'll know that they're leggy because they start to look tall and thin and kind of spindly. These are not healthy plants. A healthy seedling is gonna be kind of stout and sturdy and dark green. That's what you wanna see with your little seedlings. To make sure that you're giving them the right kind of light and that they're getting at least 12, preferably 16 hours of light per day. So I'm doing a lot of my growing directly in beds this year. I'm not gonna do a lot of seed starting. What I'm planting here are just some insurance seeds. So I'm gonna be growing tomatoes and peppers in Florida, which I'm told is notoriously hard to do. I've never grown in Florida before. This will be my first year, so I'm learning a lot too. So basically what I'm gonna do is grow some insurance plants. And this way, if I have an issue with germination by direct seeding, or if my plants begin to grow and they struggle or they die, I will have plants to go in their place. Now, tomatoes, peppers, those are gonna take a long time to reach maturity. They can actually grow in these cups for 6 to 8 weeks before we plant them in the ground. Because of this, I'm growing these seeds. Oh, that's too many. Because of this, I'm growing these seeds in larger cups. If you were to grow lettuce or spinach or something like that before you plant it in the ground, you can use these smaller trays. You don't need all of the space that I'm using here. Like I said, this is because my seedlings are gonna be in this space for quite some time. An important note about planting your seeds is seeds are really cheap. So for me, a best practice to ensure germination is I always plant 2 to 3 seeds per planting hole. Now, you don't have to do that. You could probably do okay with just one, but this helps me ensure germination, and I can pick out the healthiest plant as it's growing and then just thin the one that maybe doesn't look as healthy. Also, there are some seeds that do not want to be transplanted. Things like cucumbers, beans, any of your beans, squash like zucchini, summer squash, or even winter squash like your pumpkins. Those crops are not gonna wanna be transplanted. They're just not gonna do as well. Also, your root crops, carrots, radishes, turnips, all of those are not gonna do as well being transplanted. They need to be direct seeded. And a lot of times with your fast growing crops like lettuce, it's probably more effective to just plant those directly in ground unless you're dealing with germination issues. Lettuce can be transplanted. It does fine being transplanted, but I've just found that it grows so quick, it germinates pretty well, that I can just direct seed that in the bed and I don't have to waste seed starting mix or containers or my time to start those and then transplant. All right, I'm gonna plant my last tomato here. It's a Cherokee Purple, which I really love this variety. And like I said, I have been told that these do not do as well in Florida. I've been watching some YouTube videos and listening to some gardeners that have been successfully growing in Florida for some time to get some tips and tricks on how to grow these out here. But I'm told that they really don't like it. So they don't like our humid environment. They don't like all the pests and disease. And that's something I'm gonna deal with this growing season, is a lot of pests, a lot of humidity, which causes disease. Tomatoes don't love that. So I'm gonna try to overcome those challenges. So stay tuned with me throughout the growing season and we are going to learn together. The next mistake that's really easy to make is not watering properly. So when growing in cups or trays or containers, there's a lot less space. So the soil is gonna dry out really quickly. It's important to check your soil probably every single day. You'll know that it's dry because the top is gonna be light brown and look kind of crusty and crumbly. And if you see that, you know it's time to water. I actually prefer bottom watering. And what bottom watering is I have a tray like this one with no holes in it. And then my seed cups, they do have holes on the bottom. And rather than dumping the water over the top and splashing out my little seedlings, what I'm actually gonna do is pour the water in the bottom of the tray. And then I'll just allow these cups to sit in here for about 20 minutes. After about 20 minutes or so, I'm gonna dump off the excess water. Because what's gonna happen is as these little cups sit in here in the water, the soil is going to take up, it's gonna wick up the water that it needs. And whatever excess is left, we do not wanna allow our seedlings to sit in. So we'll dump off that excess. And like I said, it takes about 20 minutes, maybe 30. and then just dump off the excess. This is something I'm gonna do, like I said, about every day, or at least check my soil every day to see if it needs water. We want consistent moisture levels. We don't want our little seedlings drying out, and we also don't want them sopping wet, saturated in standing water. Another really common mistake that a lot of people make is skipping the hardening off process. So if we plant our little seedlings in trays or cups or containers, we take them inside and we grow them under grow lights for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, however long. Well, they've become acclimated to the indoor conditions, and inside the temperature's probably pretty consistent. They get the right type of light. They have the grow lights that they're under. There's no wind, there's no bugs, there's no humidity or consistent humidity. So they get acclimated to these indoor conditions, and ultimately, to be honest with you, it makes our seedlings a bit weak. So to strengthen them to go out into the outside environment and to be acclimated to wind and rain and harsh sun rays, we have to do what we call hardening them off. Now, this process should be ideally about 7 to 10 days. And what we do is we gradually increase the amount of time and the exposure they have to the outside elements. So we start maybe on day 1 by taking our seedlings outside for 2 hours, putting them in a shady location, and then bringing them back in. The next day, maybe we take them outside for 3 to 4 hours. We increase the amount of exposure they have to the sun during this time, and then we bring them back in. And we keep doing this until we get to the point that they're spending the whole day and then the whole night outside before we transplant them into their final home. By doing this, they will be acclimated to the environment. They'll be stronger, healthier plants when you plant them in the ground. If you were to skip this process and directly transplant them, you could wind up with seedlings that die, or if they don't die, they're gonna struggle throughout the growing season. Another mistake you're gonna wanna avoid is planting too deep or too shallow. A very good rule of thumb is to plant your seedlings about twice the depth of the size that they are. So a zucchini seed, for instance, is gonna go a lot deeper than something like a lettuce seed. A lettuce seed, a spinach seed, those are just gonna be lightly covered with soil, whereas a zucchini or a summer squash or even a winter squash, those are really big seeds. You're gonna wanna push those down a little bit further and cover them with soil. To be honest with you, this can take some time to get right and a lot of practice. So if you're experiencing poor germination or germination issues, you may want to check the depth that you're planting at and start experimenting with how deep that you're planting things. And here's the thing, you're gonna get better at seed starting the more that you do it. So if you find, especially in the beginning, that you have some germination issues, or if you have seedlings die, don't get discouraged, don't give up. It takes time to learn how to do this well. And even experienced gardeners have plants that die, seedlings that fail, things that happen. So there's no such thing as a 100% success rate. The most important thing is just to get started and plant your seeds. I'm gonna go ahead and dump this water out because it's probably been over 20 minutes, and my little seedlings will hopefully germinate in the next few days. Hope you guys got some value out of this video. I hope it answered some of your questions. Leave me a comment down below and let me know if you're starting in seed trays or cups this year, or if you're planting directly in bed, and what you're excited to grow. I'll see you guys in the next video, and until then, I'm gonna leave a video on the screen for you to check out. May your garden be full of grace, and may you be abundantly blessed. We'll see you next time. Bye.